I first want to start off with every education organization gets Office 365 A1 for free. You get it for free. What that provides you is Exchange email online. That provides you Office on the web. That provides you Microsoft Teams. That provides you OneDrive. It provides you pretty much everything kind of in the general Office sphere of things, minus the ability to download and install the full Office on a Windows and a Mac computer. That would be an additional license that you purchase. I'm not going to kind of cover those additional licenses today. I wasn't planning on it, but I can certainly kind of talk about it a little bit. So you get a lot for free. And so just by default, how you get your tenant set up, you can go out and get one. Sometimes they're already created. Often Renan will inquire of like, hey, somebody set up a tenant and we need to get global admin access to that. That might be something I can walk through at the end. But imagine you're a customer, you have M365, and I'll kind of describe what the difference is between M365 and Office 365. But anyway, the first place that you're going to land to do all of your administration is this M365 Admin Portal. And so you're probably confused, like what's M365 because we have O365. Well, Microsoft 365 Admin Center is just kind of the top level portal. There's a lot of sub portals. Think of it as your account home. So when you go to your account from Microsoft for your particular licensing, this is the top level tenant or administrative portal. And so it's just, you'll hear me kind of refer to it often as admin.microsoft.com or the M365 Admin Portal. There are various licenses that are bundled. So there's, Office 365 licenses, there's M365 licenses, and I'll briefly show you what those are. But fundamentally, what you get out for every education is Office 365 A1. So to kind of first understand what that is, on the far left-hand side, I'm going to go down to billing. And if you come down here to the licenses, you'll see on my screen, you'll see what your available licenses are for your particular organization. So by default, everyone should have the Office 365 A1. In my example here, I set up this is a trial tenant I have for Office 365 A5 and an M365 A5. I actually added the M365. So just here where you would see your Office 365 A1 licenses. If you ever want to start a trial, you simply just come up to the purchases services, and in here there is every service pretty much within Microsoft 365 you could start a trial. So kind of that next level tier that we often see customers go to if they have A1 is M365 A3. This is not an education tenant. The equivalent in the consumer space is E3. So E3 is equivalent to A3. It's just A is for academic, E is for like enterprise. It's the general commercial side of things. But simply, if you want to start any trials, you can come and click on it and then click this get a free trial, and you can get a free 30-day trial for pretty much everything in Microsoft. So that's the quick way to get trials, a quick way to see your licenses that are available in here. Kind of the next thing is you have all these licenses. Well, how do you do a license assignment to a particular user? So I have a couple of these. You could start from the licenses or you could start from the users. So easiest way here is imagine I have Office 365 A5. I can click on this. I could click assign licenses, and I could simply start typing the name of people in my organization. Or you could scroll down and see them. So if I want to assign one to Bill Pete, I could simply assign it to him and click assign, and it'll assign that license. Embedded with each of the licenses is a lot of sub licenses. Now, this one is a A5, so it has a whole bunch of stuff, but an A1, you could selectively choose to, turn off OneDrive if you wanted to, or not do Exchange, or have others. And you simply just will uncheck the boxes that you want in the particular licenses within that. So that's one example of how to do that. I'm not going to assign it to him. Another way of doing that, so you could start from the licenses, is actually start with the users. So if I navigate in the top left corner up here and I go to active users, this is going to show me all the users that are in my tenant or the back end of that, of where all those users are actually stored, is in Azure Active Directory. And this data that you see on the screen here is just pulling from Azure Active Directory, since this is kind of your account view. I'm going to dive into the Azure Active Directory portal a little bit later, but if you scroll off to the left-hand side and down the bottom, you're going to see all of the sub-admin centers. So we have them for security and compliance. I have an A3 tenant, so you're able to see more like Endpoint Manager that's Intune. But you would see Azure Active Directory and Exchange and SharePoint and Teams. So SharePoint is another thing you get for free in Office 365 A1. So we'll dive into this Azure Active Directory a little bit later. But in here, you might start with the blank, or you might already have your users in there. Either way is you could click Add a User. It's kind of the more simplest way. You could fill out various name and information in here. Here, let's just put a person's name in here and show you how simple it is. You could choose to auto-generate a password or create a password. You might be wondering, wow, you have duvalschools.com. How did I get my custom domain in there? Because by default, your tenant will be created with a what we call an onmicrosoft.com address. And so adding your custom domain, in this case, like duvalschools.com is one that I went out to GoDaddy and purchased, or if you have your own, you can actually add it. I'm going to show you that here in about right after this. So how to add it. In this example, I'm just showing you how to add a user. So, auto-generate a password. Let's just click that. You can, send the password to an email upon completion. So you could specify maybe their personal email or whatever, or you could require the user to change a password at first login. So those are options that you have. So I'm going to click next. And in here is where you would do your licensing assignment. So you could selectively choose, like I said before, you started the other way of a user's already in the system. You started from the license. Here is we're creating a user and we're assigning licenses. So Robert is in this example, we'll just give him the faculty license and student. And then if you wanted to add specific ones, so by default, they'll all be selected down at the bottom. I would encourage you to have those selected. And typically click next. In the next screen, there's some various, you could assign permissions to them if they want to be an administrator, but most often not. So within the, I'll cover that later. Here is you could input their job title. You could say faculty, department, I don't know, IT, office, room 16. You could input their phone number, mobile phone number, street address, and various other information in here. They can also update their profile later on if they wanted to do that. So going down, it just gives you kind of review and finish. This is a recap of what finish adding, and that simply will just create the user in the particular for them. And so it has the information, it'll show them the password. You can copy and paste that and send it to them. And so that assigns that user. So in my example here, I have quite a few. This is my main what I call my demo tenant per se. And so you could see Robert was listed right down there in that example. So users, you can also remove licensing and others and do a couple of other options within here. So let's look at a particular user. I like to use this one. This is my main one. If I simply just click on that particular user, it's going to show various information about that user, his last sign in, what his username is, what alias is. I could initiate sign outs on that particular. I could see what groups that user is particularly part of. And then roles also. So this is my main global administrator role. So there are certain roles within the M365 tenant that you can have. Most often in small organizations, you'll pretty much be global admins, but you could segment out based upon, hey, you're an email admin, or you're a Teams admin, or you're a SharePoint admin. You can actually distinguish that. We call that role-based access control. And then you have various contact information down here. And you could look at their office activations if you wanted to, or have multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is an additional use right. So that would come with an A3 license. You can see what devices are associated with the particular user. Licensing, this is where you could update, add, or remove licensing on there. You click mail, and it'll show you just a little bit about the mail settings. But if you wanted to know more about the mail settings, of course, on the far left bottom corner down here, you could go to the Exchange portal and do all administration for the Exchange account on that. This just shows you kind of a top level snapshot. And then OneDrive. OneDrive's great. Being able to store all of your personal data in there and share that out. So in here, you're able to look at their storage, the usage capacity, and sharing and other data retention aspects of that particular piece. So you could also change their photo for them. So that's kind of a user and how to create a user or how to look at attributes of a user. I'm going to talk about how do you get all of your existing users in here when I go to the Azure Active Directory portal a little bit later in this presentation. But if you have Active Directory deployed like on-prem in your organization, you simply just install a connector on your domain controller that will actually create all of those users that you have in your on-prem Active Directory into Azure Active Directory. They'll just simply show up here. And then you could assign licenses and they could take advantage of all the great resources that you have. So Exchange email, again, totally free. Teams, again, free. SharePoint, free. What was the other? OneDrive, free. Those are all things that you get for free just by simply being an education organization. So that's kind of users, that's kind of licenses. Let's kind of continue the tour. In the top left, I kind of in this nodes up here, as I call them. There's a couple of other in here. I'm not going to dive into these kind of for the sake of time. You can go and explore in those groups. You can create groups, particular users or devices, security groups. There's only two types of groups within here. There's security groups, and there's also M365 groups. Some of you may have heard, well, I only know about O365 groups. They recently rebranded them, and so they're M365 groups. Those are used for collaboration, kind of think of it as more or less a distribution group. And security groups are that, security groups for various things. So you could just simply click, add a group, come in here, select which ones that you want, go through, name it, add users. So we could say OETC. Description, everyone default, and you could assign particular owners to that group. Let's sign, I don't know, who was the person that we made? Let's say Ruby. In there, you could assign a group email address to that particular group if you wanted to do that. So you could OATC at duvalschools.com and choose if you want public or private in those particular, and then create a team for this group if you wanted to. So that would be a Microsoft team for it. When you create so I won't just click public, create a group, and then after that you can go in and start adding people to that particular group that you want to. One of the other fun things about groups is, so you've got M365 groups, distribution groups, mail-enabled security groups, and security groups. Those were kind of the more options that you have. So that's kind of groups in a nutshell. Roles, I talked about that earlier, where you've got certain roles within there. Here's all of these inbox roles that you have available. More likely than not, pretty much everyone in your organization will be the global admin, which means you have full rights to everything within your tenant. And again, if you wanted to segment out, like you have a certain individual where they only do Exchange, you could just designate them the Exchange admin. They only have access to go into Exchange and perform administration. You also have help desk administration. So there's certain things that they can do. You have certain people that could just do license administration. So I think you get the point in terms of going through here and identify a role, and each role has a description of kind of what their permissions are, and you could assign that to a particular user. Kind of see, and I'm just kind of scrolling down. There's ones for Teams and quite a few other ones. SharePoint is another. There's also I kind of call it the global reader role. Think of that as you could see everything, you just can't make any changes. That's a great one to have. So if you ever are assigning a role, let's say you are the Exchange admin, I would always recommend to assign the global reader role. So that way you're able to see everything, but you may not be able to actually make changes on certain things. So that's kind of roles in a nutshell for that. Kind of moving down, resources node over here on the left-hand side. I'm not going to kind of spend any amount of time of that. Billing, we spoke about this earlier, where we talked about if you want to purchase services, or even you guys are a consortium, so you wouldn't necessarily come into here and purchase services, but you would come in here to start trials. And this is a great way to understand the additional value that you could get out of M365. Like I said before, most organizations, they start with M365 or Office 365 A1. The next kind of level tier is they move up to the M365 A3 in here. So what that really provides you, that A3 license, is Intune, Config Manager, so device management. It provides you additional capabilities around Azure Active Directory, like multi-factor authentication. And the third one is in being able to download and install the full Office on a Mac and a Windows PC. That's kind of that next tier of where we see customers moving in their journey with Microsoft licensing. And so I've kind of covered everything else in terms of you can come down to licenses on the side here and see what licenses that you have. Support. So kind of continuing the journey on the side. Let me close these up a little bit. So support, you have free support. So if you, part of what you have is not just licenses, but you can open support tickets in the event that you have issues. So that is free for you. And simply just come down to the support node, click new service request. There's going to be this bot that asks you a couple of questions, and fill out, answer the questions, and eventually you'll get to choose whether you want somebody to call you back or email you. And again, that's completely free to you. So this is how you can open a support ticket on that. So it'll also reference documentation as part of this setup also, if you want to, the forums and such for kind of the top issues. But I think the key takeaway is support is free for you based upon your licenses that you have. So kind of continuing down this journey, I'm going to go to the support, not support node, the settings node. So domains, this is where you could import your custom domain. So you could do it here, or you could do it in the Azure Active Directory portal. I actually kind of like to do it here because it's a lot more simpler of a setup. So you can add a domain, you can even buy a domain. So a couple options. So this is how, like I said before, by default, you're going to get your initial tenant, set up with a on Microsoft.com address. You'll choose kind of the first half of it, but it's going to be on Microsoft. That's just going to be there because you need a domain to establish the tenant when you first create it. But then later on, you want to add your own, Contoso.edu or whatever. And so here's an example of mine, which is Duval School. So if I want to add one, just simply come up and click add a domain. What's the domain that you want to add? I could type in ormanfamily.org, let's say, or you could say ormanschool.edu. Simply use this domain. There's actually a video that walks you through this. And in order to add that domain, you'll need to add a text record to the DNS. So if your DNS is actually, let me go back and actually use one that I know, because it will actually do a domain lookup. This is one that I'll use as an example because I don't have one. So it did a check and it knows that, oh, hey, it did a DNS lookup and knows that that domain that I just entered belongs to GoDaddy. So actually, they can actually go through a sign-in verification right from here to verify that domain ownership of it. Or you can manually add a text record by going to GoDaddy. You get to choose kind of what you want. But either way, in order to add your domain, you'll need to verify that you have ownership of that domain. And the way that you do that is by adding a text record in your DNS. So once you get that all done, then your domain will show up. So in my examples, it was Duval Schools. I can click into that, and you can see various information that you have with that, what the other records are, users and apps. So once you have that domain, your custom domain in there, what that provides you is the ability to create email addresses and others. So now, like I showed you earlier, I created robert@duvalschools.com. You're able to use that domain, and I could assign him an exchange license. So now he has full email set up for that and everything. I showed you that earlier. So that's the simplest way of adding your custom domain to your M365 tenant. Kind of continuing our journey down on the far left-hand side here. The next one kind of is org settings. This is where you can define various, see other settings that you have. I'll say I don't spend a lot of time in here because pretty much everything is enabled by default for what you need out of here. The one thing that I will say is one of the primary reasons why I do come into here is for Microsoft Teams. So in here, when you click on Microsoft Teams, by default, the students down here will be not checked. This is a global setting. So if you assign a Office 365 A1 student license to a student and they try to log into Teams, they're going to be blocked because this is a global site-wide setting. So if you want students to have Teams using a student license, you need to make sure that that checkbox is checked. This trips up a lot of people. And so that's why I'm showing it to you in the event that you guys are using Teams or you want to expand upon Teams within your organization. So that's the setting within that one. Other than that, I would encourage you to come into here and explore some of the other settings that you could make and turn on. Like I said before, majority of things are on. You don't have to come in here and turn any knobs and dials, just things out of the box are going to work. Really, all you have to do is just put your users and assign licenses. And after that, just stuff starts working on the back end. I'm going to continue down here. Setup. This is kind of a guided setup for you. So as you come down, setting things up, like get your custom domain set up. I've already done that, but this will guide you through various, think of wizards, I would say, kind of thinking of it in a way to help you finish configuring and setting up your tenant. The other one was around sync users and organization. So this is all in the sign in and security tab of this. So the other way is around synchronizing your users in your own directory. So this is where I spoke about how you can, if you have an on-premise domain, you can install the Azure Active Directory connector and it will synchronize the users up there. I'm going to show that a little bit later, but you could view a kind of a status within this. So that was the setup. Reports. This is actually really cool. I actually really like this. So if you come down into the usage one, this is the one that I'll show. Is this will actually show you usage of everything going on within your tenant. You know, how many active users. So down here you've got your color codes for Office 365 Exchange. So again, this is my personal tenant, so it doesn't have a lot of usage, but you get the point. You know, OneDrive usage, SharePoint. Just overall kind of that, you know, looking down here, you're able to see more active users. Those are people that just have, you know, certain sign-ins within a period of time. That's the total M365. M365 apps, that's Office Pro Plus, what you could download and install. They went through a recent rebranding. It used to be called, you might refer to it as Office 2013 or Office 2016 or Office 2019. Those are versions that are activated via on-prem KMS service. The other version is M365 apps. It recently was rebranded M365 apps. It was Office 365 Pro Plus, and so it kind of trips up people because of the recent rebranding. But that effectively is the version of Office that is constantly getting updates monthly. It is activated and tied to your subscription. You don't need a KMS or any on-premise infrastructure in order to activate it. Having that gives users the ability to download and install Office on up to 5 different devices. So that's the additional benefit that is included in the A3 licensing pack. Email activity, you're able to see various information. I think key out of all of this is really just you can get in here and see some usage analytics and telemetry data about just across your tenant that you have. So in terms of your users. There's some other things around productivity score that was recently announced at Ignite, and then security and compliance in there. But I'm not going to spend very much time in those particular pieces. Kind of the next node that I'm going to come down is this health node. And there's kind of 2 things that I want to talk about within this one is really around service health. So this is where you can come to see if there are any outages within the M365, any of the Microsoft products, and they'll tell you. So Exchange looks like they have 1 incident and 1 advisory. And you could simply just click into this and they'll tell you more details about what that incident is. You can click into it again and it's going to show you more detailed data about what it is, what the impact of that, and when the next update and such is coming. So that's the easiest way to kind of understand, healthy or incident related. You can also come up to the tabs across the top. So there's the incidents tabs. You're able to see, just across the board, what incidents you have. Advisories, you're able to see what those are. And then a history. You're able to see what issues across the board and dive into it. You may be experiencing issues from anything. This is the first place to come up to your service health, look to see if there are any outages or incidents or even advisories is the best place. Or if you need to report an issue, this is another one that you can. This is not necessarily a support ticket, but you can also report a specific issue within your organization for any need. Message Center. This is awesome. This is where if Microsoft sends you, you'll both get an email and it'll also be postage in Message Center. So actually, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. There is so much changing on a weekly basis. There's so much value being added. Engineering is constantly releasing updates and new features and capabilities. And it's oftentimes hard to stay abreast. Even as me, as a technical specialist, I am challenged weekly for just how much is being delivered. And so, staying current is something that I have to maintain. And so Message Center is the best place to kind of hear about the new things that have been released for you. This is not roadmap. This is new things that have been released, or maybe other important information or changes to subscriptions or other stuff. They'll post it to Message Center. And so you can actually, so this is a big one, update Microsoft Teams when you record a meeting. So instead of being stored on Stream, they're actually going to store it on OneDrive or SharePoint. So that is a change. So they posted the Message Center. So you can click on it, and then you could further read over here more about the details of what that is. And they usually have links to more detailed information on that. So it's the best way to stay up to date. So one of the things, like if I go to active messages, instead of always having to come here to the web portal to see it, they will send a weekly digest on Mondays. And I actually block off 30 minutes of my time on Mondays to just simply digest that digest because a lot changes. So I look into the information, I get both educated, I get more awareness about, hey, well, maybe this issue will affect one of my customers, or maybe I have to, do something in order to help evangelize this. So in here on the far right hand side, when you click that preferences, so I'll do it one more time, this preferences button, you click on it, you could selectively choose which services you want to receive updates about. I pick it all because I support pretty much everything. But that is the example that you get down within that. And then this tab is where you get to specify email addresses that you want to. So I put in my personal email in there. So if you want to receive those, a good one might be input a distribution group in that particular, so that everyone in your certain organization can get all of these updates. And again, this is the best way to stay up to date and kind of those current changes. So kind of continuing the journey down on the left-hand side, there's some other sub nodes down here. The one that I wanted to show you also was Active Directory. So this is going to open up and dive you into the Azure Active Directory, which is the identity repository for all of your users. So this is what actually, just like on-premise, if you have Active Directory, this is Azure Active Directory. So I can click on this. There is a whole lot of stuff in here. I want to just kind of focus on a couple of these. If I go into users, it's going to show me that same view of all of my users. It's just a little more detailed information. It's similar what I had back in the admin portal when I went back up and I looked at active users, kind of the same information, just in this M365 portal. It's querying Active Directory and Azure Active Directory and presenting that information. But you could do administration in either. It really doesn't matter. I sometimes will just show information in both of these. So there's users, there's groups, there's other various information in here that you have. I don't want to spend a lot of time in here kind of going over those. I've covered the key ones, but the one that I do want to is Azure AD Connect. So navigate in here to that. We'll wait for this particular render. Azure AD Connect is that tool that I spoke about of how you can get your users that you currently have in your on-premise Active Directory into Azure AD. So it's a tool, a utility that you install. It's a sync agent effectively, because every half hour it'll synchronize. Here we go. But basically you would come in here and you wouldn't have anything, but there's a button in here right over here that allows you to download and install. So download and install the Azure Active Directory connector. You download it, navigate to your domain controller, install it, sign in using your global admin credentials, select the various OUs that you want to synchronize, and it's going to synchronize all of those users up into Azure Active Directory. And they'll keep them synchronized between the two. So that's a way of how to extend your services and capabilities that you have. I spoke before of how you can create users. I showed that. You can also create users in bulk. So if you don't want to have that connector, or some people don't have students in their Active Directory, maybe they reside somewhere else like Gmail and you want to move them over. There's no connector between Gmail and Microsoft 365, but you can do a bulk create, effectively just uploading a CSV file that contains all those particular users, and it will automatically create those users. So that's a way of doing that. So those are various bulk actions that you can take. Or the Azure AD connector, which will synchronize those users from the on-premise domain up into Active Directory. You can also come in here and see your custom domains. So again, I showed you how to add those and walk you through. It's another place of where you can do that. Whoops. That's pretty much it in terms of the Azure Active Directory portal. I'm going to close that out and I'm going to go back to the other one. So if you click on all admin centers down at the very, very bottom, it's going to show you, because by default, not all of them are actually showed here. I've got a whole lot because I've got the A5 license assigned that has pretty much everything in it in the Microsoft suite. So in this example, so that's where you get to see all of the particular subportals that you have. And so that's kind of a quick tour overall of how to get started, how to add your users, how to get things going, where you can find additional kind of information in the setup and those particular pieces. But this should get you on that first step of, hey, I've got my tenant created. What's kind of the first things that I need to do? Top of mind is always, how do I get my users in there? Kind of walked you through of how to create them manually. Talked about how you can install the Azure AD Connect tool in order to synchronize those users up, or you could do the CSV import. Walked you through that. Talked about how to assign licenses. We talked about the various licenses that you get for free. Showed you how you can add additional trials for that. And then talked about various usage reporting, how to open a support ticket when you get stuck or you need help. We talked about how to remain current in terms of message center and seeing any incidents within your tenant. And then some of the subportals down here for doing other particular things. And so that kind of closes out my general test, your first test drive in the M365 portal. I didn't see kind of any general questions in the chat. And so Renan or Margie, kind of want to open this up for the last 15 minutes for any Q&A that people had about what I talked about, or even just kind of what I haven't talked about. So this is free Q&A time, and I want to offer that up to the group.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. That was great. I know sometimes people who are guests don't have the chat option in Teams. So if you do have a question and you don't see the chat, I just invite you to unmute yourself and ask it. Remember, Eric is here for your questions, so please don't hesitate to ask your questions today.
Well, if there's no questions, I've got a question. So actually, Renan and I pinged me earlier today and said she had a customer who came in and went to, where was it at? Domains, and they were attempting to add their domain, and they couldn't because it was used in a different tenant, and they wanted to get access to that particular tenant, and so they were blocked. It's like, oh, hey, I've got my tenant here, but I wanted to add another domain. Or even there was these, Microsoft did pre-create some tenants and throw a sign-up page. People are able to gain access. You may not be able to have global admin access, but if you're ever locked out of your tenant and no one else has access to that tenant, so I mean, just you're trying to get global admin access, no one else does, there is a way that you can do that. And so let me walk you through that particular, because this might be hitting you actually. Let me pull up the page really quick. I actually have a quick little tutorial, but effectively what you would do is you probably already have your account set up. You need to open up a certain website, like a Power BI website. I have a link for it here. Or you could just try to log on to the admin.microsoft.com portal, or even office.com. I should have showed that. I'll show that next. But if you do that, actually, that's probably the easiest. If you attempt to go to admin.microsoft.com, it'll say you're locked out. The other way is to go to office.com. This is how you actually log into the web. And there will be an icon down in the bottom left-hand corner down here, like an admin icon, if there is no global admin. If there is, you click on that, it'll walk you through these steps that I'm about to explain to you. But if it doesn't, then there is a way to do this. And I'll follow up with Renan to send out the link for this page. I don't have it handy because it's kind of ad hoc. But basically what you would do is navigate to the site, you would attempt to log on to the admin center, and you want to do a domain takeover. And effectively, to do that, all you have to do is create a TXT record in your DNS for your particular domain. This example here, it was like fourthcoffee.xyz. So to create that DNS record that proves that you have ownership, and then they will add you as a global administrator to your tenant. So is it possible? Yes. I think just if I were to, I think I know the address. So totally ad hoc. The FedEx guy is here, so if you hear the dog barking in the background, it's him. Domain, take over Azure. Let's see if it's here. There it is. Perform an internal admin takeover. So basically, this walks you through those exact steps that I just did of entering that DNS record in order to verify that you have ownership of the domain, and you will become a global admin. So that's a way of getting global admin access if there was a tenant created and you were locked out. You can't open a support ticket because you have to log into the portal to open a support ticket. So this is like, you can't even open a support ticket. You can't even call. You can't do anything. You're locked out, but you need to gain access to it, or somebody else has your domain. This is the easiest way to do it. Support will refer you to this. Was there any other kind of general questions that you had?
There was one in the chat, and I'll try to do my best to read it. It says, let's say we want to stick to this awesome environment. What are some steps we can start to consider when wanting to plan to migrate data over from other platforms such as G Suite?
Yes.
Just a general readiness checklist.
Readiness checklist. So I will first direct you to a free utility that you have. Microsoft purchased Mover.io. So if you come up to Mover.io, and I will paste that in the chat message down here, this is free. In fact, this is what Microsoft Support and the fast track teams use in order to migrate users' data. This is used to, let's like go through, let me see if I can find it. Where is the, oh, here it is. It guides up at the top. But basically you can migrate data from, your data, if you have it in locally in file shares, up into SharePoint and OneDrive, or you can migrate data out of box into your M365 tenant, or Dropbox into your M365, or G Suite. That would be your option there, Zach, of, hey, we're using G Suite. How do I migrate all my users and data over into M365? Well, this tool will help you. And again, it's free for you to use. You can also migrate from Amazon and Azure Blob Services. So simply just click on the guides. It's going to walk you through the steps of how to configure and do everything. These tools are really easy to use. It's one of the reasons why Microsoft purchased it. But again, you can walk through these particular guides of how to go through that migration process.
That's great. We didn't have any other questions in the chat, but once again, if you don't have visibility to the chat, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
If there's additional things, so in here I talked about setup, where you can have these guided wizards. The other one that I wanted to show you was just the M365 documentation. So this is a great way, kind of post this in the chat. We'll follow up with these links later on also, kind of in the meeting notes. But this is another great way for the Microsoft documentation. Oftentimes you'll go and look for documentation. You might get the kind of, I call it the marketing side of stuff. And oftentimes as tech people, we want the technical documentation. So this is a good way, this URL up here at the top, to go directly to the technical documentation as opposed to the more marketing documentation on those particular pieces. I think maybe Margie or Renan, what's kind of next steps? Is there a way of people have questions after this, or maybe they get stuck that they can, how do people kind of ask questions back? I want to see if there's an opportunity for me to be available in some regards to kind of help jumpstart and point people in direction. Is there kind of anything around that you might want to talk about?
I think, Stephen, that we can talk to you about maybe being that point of contact, and then if there's any follow-up or additional sessions after that we receive feedback from this, we can set those up.
Yep, that sounds great. Because I would imagine most of the initial questions you get are going to be all the same. And so, having like FAQ or any general questions, I want to be able to offer up and say, hey, so Stephen, you can, or Renan, of course, shoot me an email, say, hey, we're having this problem, or help point us in this right direction. And that'll be able to help point you guys in that right direction. Often I get those questions because I cover a lot of all the K-12s in California. There's like just shy of 450 schools that are a part of that. Some of them are already using M365 and Office, but some of them are at different levels on their journey. And so just that's a vast amount. And then there's some other consortiums up in the Northwest also. And so a lot of people, just given current COVID situations and others, they're looking to rapidly expand, and Microsoft is providing solutions for people for free. Like I said before, as an educational organization, your use right is Office 365 A1 for all students and faculty of your organization.